Chapter 3 Unholy Alliance.
The wind howled through the abandoned streets like a mournful banshee, carrying with it the scent of ozone and something metallic blood. Rhonda clutched her coat tighter around herself, her breath visible in the unnaturally cold air as she and Mike moved cautiously through the deserted town square. "You sure about this?" Mike asked, his voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that no one else seemed to be around. The last guy who went looking for answers ended up like Officer Miller. Rhonda didn't answer immediately. Instead, her eyes scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of movement or life in their small town, which had somehow transformed into something out of a nightmare under the crimson glow of the blood moon. "Look," she said finally, pointing to a dilapidated house at the edge of town, its windows boarded up and covered with graffiti. "That's Old Man Jenkins' place. He's been living here since before I was born. If anyone knows about supernatural creatures in this area, it'd be him." Mike raised an eyebrow skeptically. "The hermit who hasn't left his property in decades. That guy. He doesn't leave because he has things to hide," Rhonda replied cryptically as she led the way toward the rundown house. As they approached, something moved in one of the boarded-up windows, just a brief shadow passing across what little light filtered through cracks in the wood. Mike froze, his hand instinctively going to the hunting knife he'd taken from his truck before leaving. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Rhonda nodded grimly. "We're being watched." She knocked on the door 3 times, paused, then twice more. A moment later, a small panel slid open at eye level, revealing one milky white eye surrounded by wrinkled skin. "You kids lost?" came an ancient voice from within. "Shouldn't be out after dark tonight. Not with what's prowling around." "It's Rhonda Chen," she said, recognizing the eye as belonging to Richard Jenkins, her father's old friend. "My dad sent me. He said you might know something about unusual occurrences in town." The panel slid shut for a moment before swinging inward to reveal Old Man Jenkins standing in what appeared to be his living room. The place was cluttered with books stacked precariously on every surface, shelves lining the walls from floor to ceiling filled with jars containing things Rhonda didn't want to identify. "Come in," he said, gesturing with a gnarled hand that looked more like a bird's claw than human flesh. "And be quick about it. The moon is high tonight." Mike and Rhonda exchanged glances before stepping inside, the door slamming shut behind them as if by its own volition. The room was dimly lit by dozens of candles placed strategically around various objects, skulls, bones, strange symbols carved into wooden tablets. In one corner stood a cage containing something small and furry that hissed at their approach before retreating to the farthest corner. "Don't mind Mr. Whiskers," Jenkins said with a chuckle that sounded like dry leaves rustling. "He's just a bit protective of me." Mike couldn't help but notice the collection of weapons on the wall behind the old man: silver knives, stakes, crucifixes, and several bottles filled with dark liquid that smelled faintly of garlic. "Mr. Jenkins," Rhonda began carefully as she took in her surroundings, "we've been hearing some strange things about people changing under the blood moon." The old man's eyes widened slightly at this mention before narrowing into suspicious slits. "What kind of changes?" he asked cautiously. "The bite kind," Mike interjected bluntly. "People turning into wolves and vampires. You know anything about that?" Jenkins let out a long, shuddering sigh as he sank into an ancient leather armchair that looked like it might collapse under his weight at any moment. "More than I'd care to," he admitted finally. "Happened once before, back in 21 when the moon turned red like this. People said it was some kind of curse, that those who died under its glow would return as something else." Rhonda's eyes widened with realization. "That's why you live out here alone, isn't it? You've seen them before." "Seen them? My dear girl, I've fought them," Jenkins replied grimly, running a hand over his wrinkled face. "My brother was one of the first to change that night. Had to put him down myself with this very knife." He patted the silver blade at his belt. Mike picked up one of the jars from a nearby table, examining its contents. a small creature suspended in clear liquid that appeared to be a cross between a rat and something else entirely. Its eyes were open and seemed to follow his movements. "What are these things?" he asked, trying not to let his disgust show too much. "Remnants," Jenkins said cryptically as Mike hastily placed the jar back on the table. "Bits and pieces left behind by those who couldn't complete their transformation fully." Just then a sudden crashing sound came from somewhere deep within the house, a thud followed by what sounded like glass breaking. Jenkins' head snapped toward the noise, his milky eye suddenly alert despite his age. "Trouble," he muttered under his breath before grabbing one of the silver knives from the wall and handing it to Rhonda. "Take this, just in case." Mike had already drawn his own knife as they followed Jenkins through a narrow hallway lined with more shelves containing jars, books, and strange artifacts collected over what appeared to be decades. They entered what looked like some kind of study or library, a massive room filled with towering bookcases overflowing with ancient tomes bound in leather that smelled of dust and age. In the center of the room stood a large oak table covered in an open book whose pages were filled with strange symbols and diagrams depicting human figures transforming into various creatures. "The grimoire," Jenkins whispered reverently as he approached the table, his gnarled fingers tracing patterns on one of the pages. "It's been in my family for generations, contains knowledge about all manner of supernatural beings." As if summoned by the mention of its name, a sudden gust of wind blew out several candles in the room, plunging them into near darkness except for the crimson light filtering through the boarded windows. "Did you feel that?" Mike asked, his voice tense as he gripped his knife tighter. Rhonda nodded, her eyes darting around the now darkened room. "We're not alone." Just then, several figures materialized from the shadows, teenagers dressed in black clothing adorned with silver jewelry and strange symbols painted on their faces. There were 4 of them, 2 boys and 2 girls, and they moved with an unnatural grace that made Rhonda's blood run cold. "Mr. Jenkins," one of the boys said, his voice surprisingly calm given the circumstances, "we've come to collect what you promised us." The old man stiffened, his grip tightening on his silver knife. "I told you before, you don't know what you're dealing with." The girl who had spoken stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with excitement in the dim light. "We know exactly what we're doing," she said confidently. "The Blood Moon is here, and tonight is our night to claim power over humans like them." She gestured dismissively toward Mike and Rhonda. Mike took a step back, his mind racing as he tried to process this unexpected development. "Teenagers? Experimenting with summoning rituals?" "You're the ones who've been doing those internet rituals," Rhonda realized suddenly. "The ones my dad mentioned." The boy laughed, a harsh sound that echoed unnaturally in the candlelit room. "Internet rituals? Please, we found these ancient texts online and figured out how to make them work. Tonight we become something more than human." Before anyone could respond further, one of the other teenagers let out a sudden guttural snarl as his body began contorting, his spine twisting unnaturally, hair sprouting across his skin in coarse dark fur, fingers elongating into claws tipped with razor-sharp talons. Mike and Rhonda exchanged horrified glances as they realized what was happening. "You changed them," Jenkins accused, his voice trembling with rage. "You used the grimoire to turn these children into monsters." "Monsters," the girl said, her own body beginning to undergo similar transformations though at a slower pace than her companion. "We're becoming gods. The power of the Blood Moon flows through us now." The transformed teenager lunged forward with terrifying speed, his massive paws swiping at Mike, who barely managed to dodge in time. Rhonda swung her silver knife, but the creature was too quick, batting it aside as if it were nothing more than a twig. "Run!" Jenkins shouted as he grabbed an ancient-looking crossbow from where it leaned against one of the bookshelves. "Get out while you still can!" But Mike and Rhonda couldn't leave, not with these teenagers in the midst of some kind of supernatural transformation that they appeared to be controlling somehow. The remaining 2 teens began their own transformations, their bodies twisting and contorting into something not quite human but not quite animal either, something new entirely created by whatever strange magic they'd been dabbling in. "Help me," Rhonda cried as she tried to fend off the now fully formed werewolf-like creature that was circling her with predatory intent. Its yellow eyes glowed with malevolence as it sniffed the air, its tongue lolling out of